The gibbet of Montfaucon, I've got to say that was in the 15th century, where they hung bad lads like the poet Français Villon. So this area has always had a big reputation for being the home of rebels. I'd like to start off, Mark, if I can just ask you about the very beginnings of punk here in Paris with your very famous shop, Open Market, which was in Les Halles. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, okay. We were a lot more connected immediately with New York and America, because the punk movement started in New York and not in England or France, come later. But at the time, I was one of the first one to use the word punk in Europe, back in 72 and 73. And then a lot of people came from England to Paris. Paris was more happening somewhere, you know. And I see a lot of people like Malcolm that I used to know already. You know, Malcolm, he wanted to call the movement the New Wave.
So historically, this is a very interesting moment where Mark Zermatt is arguing that the word should be punk, and Malcolm McLaren is the new movement should be called New Wave, Nouvelle Vague. Yeah. Mark Zermatt wins the day, that's right. Is it?
Yeah, exactly. And Malcolm was in the New Wave because he wanted to relate to the French situationists, to the French ways of being mods at the time.
And this is all in a record shop by Les Halles?
Yeah, of course. And we were importing, actually, we started a company in England with another French guy called Larry Debay. It was called Bizarre Record Distribution, where we start distributing in England the first punk release in America, like, by example, the Patti Smith single, televisions, and then my label too, Skydog, through all that. At the time, I was the first one in Europe to start a punk label. It was back in 72. We considered that we needed to do something, and the fact was we were into action, you know. And then we say, okay, we are not satisfied with all the official showbiz release from record company. We don't like it. It's boring. So we want to support only band we like. And then we decide one night to start a label without having any clue of what was a label, you know.
So this is a kind of, you know, a new version of punk history, because it's become established in Britain that punk is London, it's Britain, but it's not true.
No, it's not true. The real punk movement started in New York, and Paris came first because we were really connected to New York, more than in England, I can tell you, because all my friends, like from Nick Kent, everybody came to Paris at the time. Everybody was staying there, you know, from Lenny Kay, Patti Smith, all those guys were around, you know, they come to my shop, and it was exciting because we thought we were conspiring against the establishment, so it was great. But then, when we start the French punk scene, if we can say that, you know, all the media were against us. We were a bunch of Nazis. We were a bunch of criminals. So I had to face all this reality and to fight it. You know, when I was doing my first festival, Mont-de-Marsan, you know, in 76, it was not authorized. So I had to fight, you know, and I do it anyway. I did not care. All the festivals were cancelled because the government decided, no, we don't want that. But Mont-de-Marsan was such a peace hall, you know, so they did not mind, you know.
But Mont-de-Marsan became a legend in Britain as well. This was the first big punk festival in the world. Yeah, there's a situationist slogan. What we're thinking is in everybody's heads. There's a small group of people in Paris. You organise Mont-de-Marsan. I'm in Liverpool reading Caroline Coon's account of Mont-de-Marsan. And I'm thinking, what is this revolution? You started a revolution. Isn't that, you know?
I realize now. Because, you know, when you're living the thing, you don't realize it will be important historically. It's later, you know, than you realize.
I'm going to just describe the room that we're standing in because it's full of posters and books. I can see the MC5, the Sex Pistols, James Brown, Joe Strummer, a whole load of CDs, a whole load of pin-ups, stuff to smoke and drink, but most of all, a very tasty turntable. And I'd love to hear some punk sounds on that.
All right.
Malcolm McLaren's revolution wasn't going to be fighting in the streets. It was going to be cultural subversion. Anarchy in the UK, on the French model, meant art in the service of total subversion. Because this was a place that was the world capital of revolution, and the idea was that you could change the world through ideas and art.
always say it's a bit like a revolution. What happened with punk rock is that thing which flow around the world, and some people got the same desire, same envy at the same time, just because people are angry against the same things. The big impact of the French scene was graphic design and all the projection of punk as an image more than the music, and it was on that level bigger than what the Americans did, which was mostly rock and roll, and more people were connected to that scene came from the art scene. I mean, a lot of art students and all that. The people from Bazooka, myself was an art student. That way, when Metal Urban started, I started to design the record sleeve and everything to make sure it was going to be what we wanted to project and not what the record company wanted to do. And we carried on from that, and even the clothes and all that. Being art student, it was easier for us to customize the clothes, which we already started to do.
So I'm with Rémi Pépin here in northern Paris on the boulevard de Ménilmontant, one of the key sites for punks in the 70s and 80s. Rémi is the author of a great book called Rebelle, and also a veteran of the French punk wars of that period. Paris and punk. Actually, the sites in Paris were very important for punks, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, in the 70s, it was in the center because we had to go to record shops. There weren't any clubs, any place where you could hang out. And then we managed to organize gigs in poor places of Paris, especially in the northeast. It was a very special time for Paris. The mayor of Paris was changing the city. There was a lot of destroyed places, and everything was a bit messy like that, a bit dark and so on.
One of the things that struck me about the punk scene in Paris was that they meant it, man. They were hardcore anarchy with drugs and violence, and I was shocked, actually. Some people didn't make it out, did they?
No, of course some people didn't make it out. For me, there were two scenes. There was the first one with, bands like the Stinky Toys, Asphalt Jungle, and Metal Urbain, and so on. They were the first guys. They were a bit older than us, but plenty of drugs also. And then in our generation, which was 5 years different, not that much, there were plenty of drugs also, and plenty of violence with the skinhead movement and so on.
It seemed to me there was a kind of Parisian civil war, whether you sang in English or whether you sang in French.
Oh yeah, at the time, yeah. We wanted to say things, and we tried in French. Unfortunately, it's very difficult, and I think a few bands succeed. I think Metal Urbain succeed. I think Berrurier Noir succeed because they found a different way of making rock.
What I liked about French punk, what I still like about French punk, is that the French language shapes the sound.
Yeah.
And also the French punks weren't afraid to quote Baudelaire,
exactly.
Guy Debord.
Oh yeah,
They were intellectuals as well.
Oh yes, they are. Well, we were thinking avant-garde. We wanted to be on graphic design, on paintings, on music. So we were into everything that could change things and make a mess.
This is a very creative period. One of the slogans is "No future, une jeunesse qui n'a pas d'avenir." But it's also kind of "Vive le destroy." That destruction is creative, you know.
No, but the thing is, it was. Oh yeah, let's go. The idea was to create things and to make things out of chaos.
But it was all kind of against la société du
Yes, of
spectacle.
course. Yes, of course it was. But we were against. That was the point. We don't find places to play. Let's open places to play. And when you get there, the police is there. When you get in, you fight the police. You do. We were into things. You know.
It strikes me with this combination of art, politics, and noise.
Yeah.
It's the first time that French rock music doesn't have a cringe factor. There's no inferiority complex with London and New York. Is that right?
Yeah, we said, let's go. We can do our own, so we tried. And a few succeed. Not that much, but a few. And it was a good time.
Still good though, isn't it? So it's still worth listening to.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't listen to punk rock that much anymore because I'm a bit tired sometimes. But the most important thing was doing things. Who cares about exactly the quality of the thing? There's plenty of English band that I can't listen to anymore. It's impossible. You know.
When I think about that time, it's like one thing, a moment on stage, and it's broken into a million tiny moments. the most extreme things, like when we played at this festival, we were so drunk we couldn't climb the steps to go on stage. So the other bands were saying, what are they doing? They can't even stand up. And then we got on stage and we did our show.
Dada, lettrisme, surrealisme, situationisme, and French punk.
Is
that a family?
Yeah. That's good. Let's get Dada. Let's put all this together and let's see what happens. So Dada was okay, surrealist was okay, situationist was okay.
I'm interested in the way that Paris speaks to New York, actually. Richard Hell based his look on late 19th century French dandies. You know, Tom Verlaine was reading Verlaine. Patti Smith is reading Jean Genet out loud. She's a big fan of Rimbaud, which she's proclaiming. New York punk led me to French literature as well as French punk. I was curious. I wanted to see what was going on with all this stuff.
Everything was, chaudron, and it was, you were putting fire to the thing. And
to give a quotation from the surrealist André Breton, as above, so below. Everything's all mixed up.
Exactly. And when I listen to a few lines of the Pistols, it's completely surrealist. The flowers in the dustbin, your future life is a shopping scheme, and so on. And
it seems to me, Romain, the big story here is that Malcolm McLaren is what they say in French, a kind of plaque tournante, a kind of pivot between New York, France and London. And what he's taken from Paris are very concrete things. Lines from the Sex Pistols, A Cheap Holiday in Other People's Misery, lines in Anarchy in the UK, also the visuals, the cover of Holidays in the Sun, which is a situationist text. No Future is a slogan from 1968.
The thing is, there's an aller-retour permanent. I remember...
it's an open day ticket between
the
two cities.
Yes, because there is this circulation. We had to go to London to buy records. So we went there. And we met people and we did things.
And you brought your culture with you?
Yeah, of course.
When I think of French punk rock, I think also of the modernist movement of the 1920s. The belief that art can change the world in a total way.
At the time we were thinking that, playing music could change things, paint could change things. This was the thing that we were into, global revolution.
The thing about French punk was it was driven by ideas, and the ideas had this kind of ruthless fanaticism that drove it along, and that made it exciting. But they never produced a Clash or a Sex Pistols. Having said that, Paris is still crucial as part of the punk rock story, and I'll tell you why. What it is the French gave to UK and American punk rock the big ideas, the real politics. I think punk rock would have happened in the UK without France. The 70s was a tough time, people were angry, the sound of the dole cue needed to be expressed. But without the French, without the big ideas, without the politics, without the fanaticism, punk rock in the UK would have been nothing more than growly old rockers with shorter hair.
Everything was like so much energy. It was like, you were screaming all the time. It was 75, 76 until 79, and it was like one big night. You meet all kinds of people. You keep moving from one place to the other, but it's the same story. Like it's the same night, and then one day you wake up, and it's over.
Liberty, Fraternity, Anarchy was presented by Andrew Hussey and produced in Manchester by Jeff Bird.